So a question I get asked a lot is whether or not someone should undertake a classic car restoration project. Someone who's done more than a dozen myself, I'm pretty well versed in what it's going to take to do a restoration project. So I figure for today's video, we'll go ahead and scratch the surface of that topic, as is a very detailed answer. So the first question you have to ask yourself is, do you have the space? And this is critical because if you don't have enough space, you're going to be really cramped. You're not going to be able to do proper work. So at the very least, I recommend at least a 3-car garage. This one here that I'm in now is 2-car wide, but it's an extra car deep. So technically it could be done in this 2-car, but not with the stuff that I've got going on in here, especially with the lift. Really, you need a 2-car stall wide to be able to put the project itself and then additional space to work on individual components and store parts and things of that nature. So if you're sitting on a single car garage, technically you could do it, but you're going to be in for a world of hurt. I mean, realistically, if you want to do it right and not be yelling and screaming all the time because you don't have enough space, I recommend at least a 3-car garage to be able to do it properly. So if you've got enough space, the next question, of course, is do you have the tools? And your basic home repair set of tools with a handful of wrenches and screwdrivers and sockets is just not going to cut it. And to do a full restoration of a classic car, you're going to need a lot of tools, and depending on the vehicle, you're going to need some specialty tools specific to that vehicle. So you're going to need full sets of sockets and wrenches and screwdrivers and pliers and hammers. And if you're doing body work, you're going to need all the body tools, and you're going to need air tools. And the list of tools that you're going to need is just absolutely astronomical. So if you don't have all these tools in advance, that's something you're going to have to go and factor into your budget, because tools can add up in a hurry. And you're not going to want to go out and buy your cheap Harbor Freight tools for the bulk of your tools. I mean, you can, but you're going to end up with a lot of busted knuckles. I've definitely learned that from experience. So you're going to want to invest in some quality tools. And at the minimum, you're probably going to want to invest in like a Craftsman grade set of tools. But if your budget allows for it, you're going to want to get something like Mac or Matco, Cornwell, or Snap-on, things of that nature, much higher quality tools, which will reduce the amount of knuckles that you bust as well as parts that you break. So once you've addressed the space issue and the tools issue, you need to look at the skill set issue. And what that means is when you're doing a classic car restoration, there's a lot of skills required because there's a lot of different types of work that goes into restoring a classic car. And there's obviously the mechanical work with rebuilding engines and transmissions and suspension and brakes and things of that nature. But then of course there's also the electrical work that has to be done with wiring and headlights and gauges. And if you're doing things like fuel injection, you got to wire those things in the computer. And beyond that, there's also the interior work. So now you've got to reupholster seats, install headliners, carpets, dash pads. And from there, you also have body work, which is one of the things that I detest the most about doing a restoration is the body work. And with that one, body work takes the most amount of effort and time out of your entire restoration project. And that's because once you're all said and done and the car's painted and driving down the road, that's the main thing people are going to notice is how it looks. And if it looks like it's been driven between 2 trees and wavy as all get out, it's really going to show, and you're really not going to be happy with it. So you have to spend a lot of time on your restoration doing just the body prep work alone and then the paint job. So you have to figure out what skills do you have that will be able to apply to the restoration process, and then the stuff that you don't know, are you willing to learn it, or is it something you're going to have to farm out? One thing that can be a challenge is like the automatic transmissions. There's a lot that goes into an automatic transmission, and rebuilding those can be a challenge. Not saying they're impossible to do, but it's something that you're going to have to decide, is that something you want to fix yourself? Do you want to send it out? Or do you just want to buy a new one that's fresh, that's guaranteed? There's a lot of options to look at. And so you need to sit down and reflect on what skills you have, what skills you're missing, and what work you'll have to farm out that you can't do. Because all the work that you farm out is going to be additional costs into the restoration that you're going to have to factor in later. So after you get the space and tools and skills, the next part that you need to do is time. And you need to make sure that you are realistic with yourself on how much time you have to dedicate to this project. Because I can't tell you how many times I've been to events and I see cars that are only partially done and the owner is selling them because it was too much of an undertaking. They were really not appreciative of how much time and effort it takes in order to do a classic car restoration. And I don't want to discourage anybody, but it's definitely a huge commitment. And you don't want to get in a situation where you buy a project and you get partway through it and it takes way more effort than you thought, way more time than you thought, you dumped way more money into it, and then you just throw your hands up and then give up. So you need to be realistic on your time, and if you can't dedicate the amount of time, because we're looking at a minimum hundreds of hours to do a build, up to thousands, depending on what condition the car is you started with. And so if you don't have time to dedicate thousands of hours to a project over the next year or two, or 3 or more, then you might want to look at a car that's already got a decent amount of work already done and that you can finish up yourself. So this brings me to the next part, which is your budget. And this can be a huge factor in any restoration project, is how much money is it going to cost. So before you go out and just buy a car, you need to figure out, one, exactly what type of car you want. And then once you figure out what type of car you want, you need to look out there and discover what parts are available. The great thing is now a lot of parts are available for a lot of the classic cars. And so there are companies like OPG, National Parts Depot, Classic Industries, Year One, Brothers Trucks that all have a huge selection of parts that make the restoration process that much easier. But you need to find out if those companies have parts specific to your car, because the last thing you want to do is buy some obscure car and then be a total nightmare in finding parts for it, because that can be a huge discouragement when it comes to doing the restoration project. And if it turns out parts aren't available, you might want to consider buying a car that's almost done, that's got most of those hard to find parts already on it, so that way the restoration is going to be that much easier. And of course, with budgeting, you also need to go and figure out what type of car you're going to buy, figure out what's going to cost initially to purchase the project. You need to figure out what parts are available and get a rough estimate of what type of parts you need to buy and figure out how much those are going to cost. So most of these companies will send you a catalog for free, or you can get online on their website and access all their inventory, and you can see roughly what all these parts are going to cost, and then you can budget accordingly how much you think it's going to cost to build the car from the component standpoint. And then of course you need to figure out from earlier with your skill sets, parts that you're going to have to farm out, get quotes on what it would cost to do certain work. So of course getting quotes on certain things is going to be a challenge, just because they need to see the car or the part that they're going to be doing work for you on, like especially like paint. But you can get a rough idea from most shops on what it's going to cost to do the work that you need to have done. And then you need to go and put all that cost together. And once you get all that out in there, add probably at least a 30% buffer, because you're going to blow through that budget. I guarantee it. And I've been budgeting for the last probably 7 or 8 cars that I've done. And while I've gotten better with each budget, every time there's always unforeseen costs, and you're definitely going to go over what you originally thought. So try to plan a buffer on there. And then after you go and you've determined that you've got enough room for the car, you've got all the tools that you need, or you know how much it's going to cost to get the tools that you need, and you've determined how much time you're going to be able to commit to it, and you've decided what work you can do and what you can't do, and you've got your budget. Now you've got a good solid foundation to at least start from, to go and move forward and actually take the next step in the process, which is finding the car that you want and building that dream car. So I hope this video has been helpful. And if you have any other questions, just feel free to write them in the comment section below and let me know, and I'll be more than happy to answer them. As like I said at the beginning, I've done more than a dozen classic car restorations, and so I've got a pretty good idea on what it takes. And so I've done hot rods, I've done muscle cars, I've done a wide variety of stuff, stock, custom. So I've got a pretty well-rounded idea on what it takes to do these restoration projects. And of course, if you like the video, hit the like button. And as always, if you want to be kept up to date on the new videos I upload, hit that subscribe button and ring that notification bell. And I'll see you at the next video.